This morning, we are in a session with a keynote speaker, Theresa-Marie Rhyne. She is a color maven, an expert in applying color theory to digital media and visualization. Her book on the subject was published by the CRC Press in 2017. She currently writes on color and data visualization for Nightingale, the Journal for the Data Visualization Society, and the UX Collective, an online publication on user interface design. She has consulted with the Stanford University Visualization Group on a color suggestion prototype system, the Center for Visualization at the University of California at Davis, and the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute at the University of Utah on applying color theory to ensemble data visualization. Prior to her consulting work, she founded two visualization centers, the United States Environmental Protection Agency's Scientific Visualization Center as a contractor for Lockheed Martin in the 1990s, and the Center for Visualization and Analytics at North Carolina State University in the 2000s. She is especially excited to speak to us today. Prior to entering data visualization, she was formally educated in civil engineering at Stanford University. I will note that we will take a 2-minute break in the middle of this presentation to stand up and share what we've learned with each other. But with that, Theresa-Marie, the stage is yours. Let's welcome Theresa-Marie.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here. Yes, indeed. I graduated from Stanford University. My only formal education is in civil engineering. I have about 3 or 4 degrees, though, in civil engineering. So anyway, I'm so excited to be back talking to people who do civil engineering or civil engineering related things. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about color. It's my favorite subject. It's what I do for a living. And we're going to do a little screen share. So I want you to come away with me to color scheming and data visualization. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to give you 5 stages of colorizing. Then I'm going to discover some color spaces. We're going to do that together in what is perceptual uniformity. And then we're going to get some color harmony and color suggestion systems. And I'm going to add to your color toolbox if you already don't have color apps in your toolbox. Okay, I've come up with this 5 stage of colorizing data. Establish your data classes for visualization, select the color rule, build a color scheme, check and revise due to color deficiency, and apply your color theme to your digital elements or data visualization. Now, I'm gonna end this talk, you're gonna see me walk through this several times, so you won't forget this. Right now, it may be new, but by the time I'm through, it won't be. All right, so let's start. First color model, most of us are familiar with on a daily basis as red, green, and blue, RGB. That's about lights and displays. The next color model is cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black. Now, think about it. Why do they have key black noted in that color model? I'm gonna tell you, because when this model was developed in the 1700s, that's how long it's been around for printing, it turns out that there's more black in a book than there is cyan, magenta, and yellow. And if you forced black to be made by cyan, magenta, and yellow, there would be so much ink on the piece of paper, the paper would fall apart. So printing discovered that what they should do is just add the black ink first and then register the colors second. And that's why it's K for key black, just so you know. So you'll learn some interesting trivia from this lecture. All right, the next color model is red, yellow, blue. And this, for most of us, was the first color model. As a matter of fact, you needed to know your colors to pass kindergarten. You probably didn't know it because you were 5 years old. But one of the first experiments you ever did in chemistry was to mix yellow and blue, and you got, everybody, green. You got green. Red, yellow, blue. That's what painters have done for centuries. Okay, now, in a perfect world, we have this great inverse relationship, which means the beautiful image that you visualized of your data on the screen, whether it be on your mobile device or if you're on a computer, should go perfectly into printing, and there should be no difficulty. So in that world, red is the complement to cyan, green is the complement to magenta, and blue is the complement to yellow. But most of us know it doesn't work like that. What happens is, usually what you see on the screen is more vibrant than what you see on paper. So let me give you the example from my own book. Here's my image in RGB space. Here's what it looked like when it went to CMYK. Okay, and I'm sure many of you have had it happen to yourself. So I'm going to discuss this a little bit further and explain it to you as my lecture goes on. I'm also going to cover perceptual uniformity color spaces, like muscle and hue chromoluminance. Now, this is very big in data visualization now, because this is what the human eye perceptually perceives most accurately. We're going to go over a couple of models of that, a couple of tools that you can use that, if you want to choose to go there. So Isaac Newton is the guy that started all this color circle and color wheel business. So he did prism experiments where he's looking at the rainbow, and then he decided, hey, I'm going to take the colors from the rainbow, put them all together in a circle, and he defined the first color circle. Now you're going to see there's a little space between violet and red. Newton did not specify or discuss this in his writing, but years later, a guy named Goethe would come along, and he would challenge Newton. Newton was long since in the grave, but Goethe would challenge his theories, and he put magenta on the color wheel, then that space between purple and red, and it stayed there ever since. It also turns out at the same time, there was a guy named Rung around 1810 who proposed the first idea of a 3D color space. Think of it as a beach ball. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further in this lecture. So let's build a color wheel ourselves. Now remember, I've told you there's a relationship between RGB and CMY. It turns out that the primary colors of RGB and the secondary colors of CMY combine together in the color wheel. And then if we add the tertiary colors, we've got 12 elements to make ourselves a color wheel. That's how the artists make it. Now, in terms of harmony, especially in terms of data visualization, you're going to see a lot of monochromatic color harmony. Now, what that is it's taken one color. Here I've used a hue. And then what you do is you add a little white, that gives you tint. If you add a little gray to that blue, you'll get a tone. And if they add a little black, you'll get a shape. Okay, now let's talk about, this is how artists talk about it. Now let's talk about analogous color harmony. That's colors located next to each other on the color wheel. Here I've got an example from a data visualization. These are analogous color harmonies. There are 5 of them. I don't know why, in terms of color apps, the convention is for there to be 5 colors shown. Somebody did that, and we don't know who that is, but now we have color schemes that have 5 colors. So anyway, I did this bubble chart, and this is an example. Now you will notice that I have some text inside of each of these bubbles. There's a reason for that, and I'll cover this many, many times in my lecture, and that's because this color harmony fails color deficiency. So if you happen to have a red-green color deficiency or green-blue color deficiency, or you could even have a blue color deficiency, you're not going to see these colors the right way that people with normal color vision see. I don't know if it's the right way, but the way color vision see it. So to make sure that I had this problem resolved, I put text. I double coded it. I have color and text inside it. All right, so complementary color harmony. I want you to notice that this is on the color wheel. These are 2 colors that oppose each other. And this is a tree map I did with 2 complements. Now, triad color harmony is 3 colors. Now, red, green, blue would be a triad color harmony, and they're equally spaced across that color wheel. As so would C and Y, the triad color harmony. Okay, and then we get the square color harmony where we have 4 colors. And to many artists, and there may be some artists sitting in this room, that is called a double complementary harmony. So I've done this with this tree map. All right, now, here is one of the first concepts you learned from Theresa-Marie's lecture. Did you know that brown is a shade of orange? Honest, I'm not kidding you. It turns out that if you have orange as a hue, and I'll show this in a diagram, and if you add black, you can get yourself brown. I wrote an article about it if you want to read some more. Let's choose our color impact. In visualization, you're going to see a lot of use of monochromatic color harmony. This should look familiar to it versus analogous color harmony. But if we think about it, analogous gives you a pleasant combination, whereas monochromatic emphasizes your data elements. Okay, as I alluded to, and here's my example again, color harmony. Just because you're in color harmony doesn't mean you pass color deficiency. So there's the color deficiency I was telling you about. That's why there are little letters describing each of the countries that these balls represent. All right, the other thing is you can get some good or bad vibrations with color. Cabral discovered this. Simultaneous color contrast. So that means if you take two complementary colors that are on the end of a color wheel, in other words, they're at their maximum hue, you can get some vibrations. So if you give people this particular bar chart example, they might get a little sick, or they might not be able to see all the values because their eyes are vibrating. So it's something to be aware of if you're going to be kind of doing some visualization. By the way, Cabral discovered this in fabric. What happened was, in France, they had a situation where they were weaving fabrics together, and the fabrics looked the separate threads looked very vibrant, but when they were put next to each other, they didn't. And he spent a lot of time and discovered the simultaneous contrast phenomena that occurs here. Okay, now here's one. We're talking about the National Academy. Transportation research was related to the National Academy. So I want to talk about the British Royal Society. James Clerk Maxwell presented RGB in 1861. It was the first color photograph ever shown where he's put red, green, and blue filters together, and all of a sudden, he produced color. I wanted to show that to you. Now, remember, historically in color theory, they were talking about red, yellow, blue. So Maxwell in 1861 said, red, green, and blue is actually how I see it. Important concept to remember. Okay, this is my hero of mine. I would like my book, if you see me on the screen, I'm gonna hold my book. I would like my book to be as successful as Ogden Rood's book. He wrote that in 1879. He wrote a book called Modern Chromatics. So color theory's been around a long time. And he covered most everything I'm gonna cover in this talk, except he wasn't talking about data visualization at all, but all the principles of color he covered. And Rood's work was so powerful that the Impressionist artists read it and made experiments based on color paintings or color experiments based on Rood's theories. That's how pointillism and divisionism got formed, or Impressionism. Seurat is probably one of the better known artists. Now, guess what? Rood didn't like this. He was not thrilled that he had this impact on art, but he did. But that would be cool if somebody said, wow, you changed data visualization with your book. Not gonna happen, but anyway, nice little fantasy. Okay, there are many other methods analogous to pointillism. The CMYK color printing process uses dots. The monitors you're looking at me on, use this displays, use guns that display red, green, and blue. Now, there are some monitor manufacturer companies that feel that if you combine, by the way, by lights, just so you know, red and green is what produces yellow. It's not intuitive because most of us learned red, yellow, and blue by paints, but by lights, red and green, red and green produces yellow. Okay, it turns out that some companies like Sharp will put a yellow gun inside their display system so that the yellow is a little more vivid than being made by red and green light. Ben-Day dots, and then those are great in comic books. Many of you seen them. And then Roy Lichtenstein, the artist, enlarged that and developed that method. This is an experiment I did years ago, just trying to understand it. All right, so I want to talk a lot about automated color analysis that you can do yourself. There's an app called Adobe Capture, and I give you the URL right up here. So if you put Adobe Capture, it'll come up. And if you have an Android phone, or you can go to Google Play, or you can go to the Apple Store, the App Store, and you can download this free map app and put it on your iPhone, and you can go to the museum like I did in North Carolina Museum of Art, take a little picture of a Monet painting and analyze the colors in it. In this, I was trying to sort of see, you look on that color wheel, I pretty much knew that Monet was what they call a plein air painter. In other words, he mixed his paints in real time as he looked at his scene. He didn't go back to his studio and paint from what he had remembered or sketched. Today, people do that a lot. They take a picture, then they go back to the studio and they paint. But anyway, what Monet did is, and I knew he probably had a glob of white paint, and then he got his colors to project the way they did by adding a little bit of a pure hue to each of them. And that's what that diagram is on the color wheel that's showing that. Okay, there's this other cool tool, another way to use it that I like it. Now, I take a walk every single morning, and I created this color scheme based on luscious green vegetation that I saw. Obviously, I wasn't walking today on this, but this is in the summertime, and this is a luscious green monochromatic color scheme that I created. So if ever you're out and you really like some colors, or you like some combinations, you can use this Adobe Capture app and get some cool, unique color schemes. All right, now, for many of us who are in data visualization, our queen is Cynthia Brewer. Cynthia Brewer developed a tool called Color Brewer, which is free and online. And in that Color Brewer, she gives a whole bunch of color schemes across the internet. I'm going to define, she comes up with sequential color schemes, which is optimized for data that goes from low to high. Think of temperature, going from low to high. Then she comes up with diverging color schemes. Now, she actually would call a temperature one. Temperature is very frequently used with what? That is a color scheme where you actually use blue for cold, and you use red for hot, and you put across a color scheme that's really a diverging color scheme, them coming together, and in the middle, warm is just white. Okay, now the other one is the qualitative color schemes. And that is where you've got a map prepared, and you don't have any particular magnitude differences you want to be shown in your data. So it might be a map of various crops. You want to show your beans and your carrots and your corn, and you want to show them in those colors. So you want your green for your beans, and you want your carrots to be orange, and you want your corn to be yellow, but you want equal scheme. You don't want one to be lighter or darker than the other. So here is Color Brewer in action. This is a particular Color Brewer scheme, and here I've applied it to broadband in the state of North Carolina. Okay, so I did an article in Nightingale in around 2021, and I talked about how to translate between color harmony and the Color Brewer combinations. So monochromatic color harmony, so that's the tints, tones, and shade. When it's translated, what we're doing is a sequential color scheme. That's progressing from light to dark or dark to light, either one, but that's combining that in a monochromatic color harmony. Analogous is going to make a color harmony. It can also make a progression, and that's a multi-hue sequential color scheme. Now, I want to give you a little clue. If it's possible that if you go into Color Brewer and say, okay, I like this particular color combination, and you put that on your bar chart, you can lead people to think your data is in a progression. But maybe your data isn't really in a progression. Remember, she's got a sequential color scheme combination. Maybe what you're trying to do is just to describe the color of 4 different regions, and you're not really progressing in a sequential fashion. So there, what you would do is you'd use an analogous color harmony. So think a little bit about how you apply your color scheme. But in terms of complementary harmony, that is the quickest way to build a diverging color scheme. In other words, magenta and green are complementary. So if you combine that together, you can quickly build a diverging color scheme, and Color Brewer has something very similar to it. But you can also have color schemes that are diverging that have nothing to do with color harmony. For example, purple and orange, and I'm going to go in detail. I'm going to talk about that diverging color scheme that I used for a particular problem, scientific visualization. And we're going to see this one in terms of the election probably coming up. We're going to see red and blue and used a lot, and I used the temperature example as well. Okay, so color harmony, the triad color harmony, if you saw that cyan, magenta, yellow, that turns out to make a great qualitative color harmony. It's 3 colors, 120 degrees apart on the color wheel. Another qualitative color combination is to use that square color harmony 4 categories. So double complements, 90 degrees on the color wheel. Now, it turns out in color harmony, it doesn't go beyond 4 colors. And I never saw artists write this, but in terms of color perception, when you get 5 categories and above, it's very difficult for people with color deficiency to distinguish between the colors. And even people with normal color vision can start to have difficulty. So here I show you an example of the red, yellow, and blue combined with the purple, green, and orange, which are the primary colors, and the secondary colors in painter's color space. And then I show you what it looks like in terms of color simulations of color deficiency. So protanopy, deuteranopy, and tritanopy. Interestingly enough, it turns out 90% of the population with color deficiency either have protanopy or deuteranopy, red, green, or green, blue. The tritanopy, the blue, loss of blue cone, is a very small percentage. Okay, so I'm going to give you some color vision principles. Trichromatic, opponent, color processing, the coexistence of both, and color deficiency in more detail. You will not forget about color deficiency after this lecture. Okay, so we have blue, green, and red as our cones in our eyes. And the first person that postulated that we had 3 types of photoreceptors in our eyes was Thomas Young. And Hermann von Helmholtz came along and classified them. Long preferring is red, medium preferring is green, short preferring is blue. Now, an important thing to remember is you are not a cell phone. What I mean by that is you do not see like a cell phone. If the blue cone of the blue goes out, you no longer can see any kind of blue combination. Well, if you're blue colorblind, blue cone colorblind, or I'll use red cone colorblind or green cone colorblind, what you have is a range. See this little diagram here? It's a range. It's not like you can't see green. What it is there's a range of colors you can't see in their combination. So I showed you some diagrams of that before. Now, there was a guy, his name was Herring, who challenged Young and Helmholtz's theory. And he said, hey, I go out into the world now. I need you to think for me for a second, lights. So I'm about to say to you, red and green out in the world of lights. Now you're going to think paints and said, if I combine those 2 together, that's icky, man. That's awful. No, I'm talking about lights. If you're out in the world, red and green, they don't mix together. You don't get mixed up. They don't mix together. Nor do yellow and blue mix together. So red versus green, blue versus yellow, black versus white. Now Herring said, this is what I see in terms of lights. And Helmholtz said, Herring, you're crazy. Man, you're out of your tree. You're crazy. So photography came into the world. And guess what? They continue to have a problem with how photographs and how people were seeing light in terms of opponent colors. And so Hurwitz and Jameson did some experiments, and they were the ones, can you believe it was in 1957 that it was actually documented? That's relatively recently in terms of color theory history. They showed red and green lights, sure enough, they produce yellow. not reddish green. Blue and yellow lights, they make white. Now you might say, huh? I know that's green. Blue and yellow is green. No, 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 no. Lights post, lights. So what does that mean? Now think about it. Red and green cancel each other out, as do yellow and blue. So if you start with bluish green and you make some yellow light, you can eventually get to green light. Now, think about this. When I say blue and yellow, if you think about it, we know that if we have red, green, and blue together, we're going to get white light. So if we have blue, and then we have yellow, which is blue, red, and green, we're going to get white light. So that's why blue and yellow makes white light. Okay, so here we got color deficiency again, and I'm showing you that chart that's saying to you, oh, if you're in the red, yellow, blue color space, some people might not see your stuff so well. Now, I recently, this is my October writing I did, I show you here that if you look at normal vision and you have green and cyan together, that's cyan, that's light blue color. If you go into protonopy, you're gonna call that yellow and purple, or yellowish and purple. Deuteranopy the same. If you're under tritonopy, you're gonna see a range of nice little cyan colors. That just goes to show you to interpret the data very differently. Or here's another one, watch your peas and carrots. Have you ever wondered why people don't have green, yellow, and orange color schemes? It turns out that you can't see them so well if you have a color deficiency. But what you can do is double code like I did again. Here I show a scatter plot where I add squares and circles. So if you have a color deficiency, you could tell the difference by the shape rather than actual color. Now here's the presidential election type stuff. All right, so we're about to go into election time again. Now, also, nationwide elections. Now somebody came up with this really cool idea. So what we'll do is we'll come up with this convention. We'll make Republicans red, we'll make Democrats blue, but for states that are swing states where it's tough to tell what's going on, we'll make that purple because that'll be a great combination. Guess what? That flunks color deficiency. So it would be much better to make it white. We'll see what happens. I'll leave it up to you. Now here's another one. We've all been talking about the country of Ukraine a great deal. So I actually am in a situation where I have a dance instructor that is from Ukraine. So I decided to look at this color combination. By the way, if you would like to know, the colors of the Ukrainian flag are Pantone colors specified in the Constitution. Ukraine's a younger country than the United States because the United States colors were specified before Pantone was a company. But I honestly tell you that the Ukrainian Constitution specifies its flag by the specific blue and yellow and Pantone colors. But anyway, now I'm asking you, not think blue, yellow equals green, but I think blue, yellow equals white light. All right, so now if you look at this, if you run color deficiencies on this combination, you'll find out something amazing, and that is people with deuteranopy and protonopy can see that color combination. It will pass through color deficiency. So people can see the color of that flag. I thought that was really cool and amazing. All right, so I want to talk about rainbow color maps. This is one of the bigger issues in terms of data visualization. For a long time, data display systems started with a default color map, and that is it did the rainbow, Newton's rainbow. It started from either purple and went to red or red and went to purple. But look down here, there's non-uniform distances. So if you put a scale across from 0 to 10 across here, your ranges mathematically don't add up. But then there's another little problem. It turns out that there are artifacts. Go back. It turns out that there are artifacts in this. So if you put this in your data visualization, now I'm by hand made a uniform color map, but if you put this in your data visualization, you don't know if that's the data or if it's the color map that's causing this problem. So here's my comparison I have down here. My friends, David Borland and Russell Taylor did this diagram. But you can see how if you use a rainbow color map at the top, that's A, and if you use other color maps that are defined as B, C, and D, your data will show up differently. Now, there's very recent work called Matplotlib. They basically came up with a color map called Verdis. Actually, Smith and DeWalt came up with a color map that was accepted by Matplotlib. And basically, this is called Verdis as a color map, rather than as the standard default, rather than using the rainbow color map. Now, it's turning out people don't like that as their standard color map. So people go ahead and use the rainbow color map anyway, but it gets to be interesting. All right, here it comes, everybody. You ready for your stretch break? All right, you've been sitting too long.
All right, so
you ain't talking.
This is a time for you to stand up, share with your neighbor. She's given you a lot to think about. What is it that you can actually use? So just stand up. Everybody stand up. This is your stretch break. Talk to each other. Start the timer. You can continue to fill us up.
So now I'm going to define a couple of color gamut spaces and systems. So I've already alluded a little bit to Munsell, but I'm going to describe it in some more detail here. Next thing I'm going to talk about is how a color model and gamut space, gamut make a color space. Then I'm going to talk about that perceptual uniformity and web hex triplets. This is very important, hex triplets, because in today's world, lots of colors are defined in terms of their hex code. So how designers match with Pantone, and is there an app on my iPhone or Android for this? And we've already said there's already one app we've already talked about, Adobe Capture. There are more apps. Okay, so let's go here. The Munsell color system. Earlier I talked about Rhyne, who in the early 1800s wanted to come up with this 3D beach ball effect. Well, Munsell decided, I'm going to make this really happen. I'm going to develop a color system, and I'm going to have 5 principal hues: red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. He got red, orange. I like the color orange, but it didn't work out. He only had to have 5. He had to have 5 principals and 5 intermediates because he wanted 10 steps, and he decided that he was going to go from black at the bottom to white at the top. He's going to measure these, and chroma was going to go out from the center. So the center was going to be your lightest color, and then you're going to go out to your most vivid color at the very end. So he had it all down. You see his diagram. It's all going to work out. It's going to be just great. By the way, Munsell is very well liked in the color world, and when at 100 years since his death, there was a big party, and I went to it. It was a lot of fun. If you're a color geek, and I am. So anyway, Munsell had this little problem. Everything was working great. He did his own perceptual studies. Everything was working great when he was in the 5 color range. But guess what? Once he got out further along, he discovered that the human eye sees a shorter amount of blue-green colors than it sees red-green colors. In other words, it goes out in the 6 range for blue-green, and goes out to about 18 for red-orange. Uh-oh, he's gonna have a little trouble getting that little beach ball, because it's not gonna be completely equal to make a nice little sphere. So Munsell came up with this nice little pear shape. Now Munsell did not define a shape. What he wrote very clearly, and he very clearly said, is it's not possible to come up with a geometric shape to define this color space. I'm going to define a tree. And what he did is he put them all the colors out on a tree. He did not connect the dots and come up with that pear shape I show you here. What he has, they were all out on a tree. Because he said it's not possible. So each one of these is a particular Munsell color, but it's not possible to come up with a geometric shape. So this is what this Munsell system, now this is an app. Andrew Reith has it out there if you want to look at your color systems. There are a lot of other places. Some of you may have worked like with the Department of Agriculture, and some of your transportation work, because agriculture uses the Munsell system. That is because of a woman named Dorothea Dixon, who actually worked for Munsell and then went on with the Department of Agriculture and applied the Munsell system for color in terms of soil science and those types of things. Anyway, you will see this. It is very possible to get hold of the Munsell book of color if you'd like to see it as an app. All right, so now I want to diverge from that. So what we're going to say is we now learn Munsell has taught us that we don't see a beach ball out in the world of color because it is inaccurate perceptually. Our human eye doesn't see a beach ball model of color. All right, but now let's talk about another thing in terms of our color models. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about red, green, and blue for a second, and the gamut that we see in terms of color space of that. Now, it turns out that our favorite friend, some of us in design, like Photoshop a lot. So Microsoft and Hewlett Packard got together and they came up with sRGB, which is what we see. I'm going to hold this up. This is my iPhone here. See my real iPhone display. Oh, I don't know how well it's showing it. In terms of, that's primarily what you see in terms of display systems, sRGB in terms of phones and computer models. The diagram I've got here, it shows matte paper. That's really CMYK. That's what it looks like when it's printed out. Now you're going to see some of that. Remember, we already learned this, right? The sRGB or the RG space is a little more vivid than the matte paper space. So this part right in here shouldn't be a surprise to you. Now it turns out Adobe said, hey, we're just going to put an Adobe RGB space. We're going to create a big enough triangle so that what you see in a display system can translate pretty well as to what you'll see in CMYK in a printing system. So that's Adobe RGB. Now Kodak got into it. They did Pro Photo RGB. And some of you who may have actual cameras may actually have something called Camera Raw. Now, Pro Photo RGB, if you look at this diagram I've shown you here, some of those colors are outside the range of what human beings can see. So you could potentially create a digital image that you can't see the complete color range. Now that horseshoe in the background, that is actually the complete range of what humans see. So this is a comparison of spectrums here. Now, where did that horseshoe first come from? That came back in CIE XYZ color space. And the idea here was to have a color space that wasn't dependent on your printer or your display device. We'll just say your display device. It wasn't dependent on how good your display device was. So they came up with this color space. Wright and Guild went out and did their perceptual color studies in the 1920s. In 1931, they came up with this great perceptual color space, which is this sort of this horseshoe thing. Now, I want you to remember, where did they get all this data? Well, they got human subjects who passed color deficiency test, or failed color deficiency test would be more accurate. They failed color deficiency test. They were not colorblind. They had normal color vision. And they put in front of them various colors, and they had them match. So let's do this test lamp. Remember I said red and green combined together are going to make that yellow. So yours, whoever selected in the study, is called the observer, and we use these our calibrated eyeballs created all this data. I say that to you so that you realize everything is based on human capabilities to see the data. So, well, realize mistakes happen. Just want to try to, don't hold on too tightly to this information. That's what I'm just saying. Because they have various formulas for handling if things got a little wobbly here and there. It's complicated reading some of this color geekdom, but I just wanted you guys to remember what's behind all of these experiments. Okay, so chromaticity diagram. I want to give you a little education on that. I still have trouble with it. The idea is all the visible colors in this kind of horseshoe range, and they can create it on by having these equations X, Y, and Z. They can put it on in a 2D platform. The edge of the diagram is the spectral locus, and then you have to have this white point. of the colors. So you have to have a center, a white point. And the least saturated colors are in the center, and the full saturated on the edge. And then any two colors, if you combine them together, you'll get a color inside this. So let's look at the line of purples at the bottom. So if I combine, of course, red and blue together, I'm going to get that magenta that's kind of in the center right down here. That's kind of how it works. Okay, now it turns out when they got into this color space world, people began in the 40s and 50s to sort of say, hey, it's this diagram isn't right. It's too heavy on the green. That people are not seeing this uniformly. And so a perceptual uniformity means a color space is uniform if a change of length in any direction X of the color space is perceived by the human as the same change. Now, those ellipses mean that if I step out, it's not an equal change. And McAdam was the first guy to notice that these ellipses defined that the color space was not perceptually uniform. So then there became all this work to make this get a little better. And they made some updates. There's all kinds of writing about this, by the way. So from all kinds of disciplines trying to get to it. So this is what they came up with. They came up with love in 1976 as a uniformity chromaticity scale. And then they came up with CIE Lab, which has probably lasted for a lot longer. Now, in theory, you're not supposed to show a color space. You're just supposed to show that opponent color theory diagram, but people have since, because computers can calculate things, have started to show a color space for CIE Lab, but it's not considered the most accurate. So there's your diagram, and now to me, this seems a little heavy on the blue, but nobody asked my opinion. But anyway, that's what the current thinking about it is. Okay. Now, why do you care? Why? You've been listening to Theresa-Marie tell you all this stuff. Why do you care? I'm going to tell you why you care. You care in your daily life because Apple has what they call a wide gamut color space. Now, you have to listen to them real carefully when they do their iPhone announcements because, they're really slick and they got these presentations down. They have a system. It's called DCI-P3. It's digital movie projection. It's a color system that's designed for digital projection devices. Probably the device that's projecting my image of me is using DCI-P3. Now, DCI-P3 is not for human designers. It's not for us in data visualization to work with. It's not designed for us. So people at Pixar, they don't work in DCI-P3 when they're using this tool called RenderMan, which they love. They use to make their movies. But here's the standard. What Apple said is, we're going to make this our standard because we're going after streaming media. And we want the streaming media so much that that's going to be the content of the future. It's streaming media. It's not data visualization and how good your visualization looks on that iPhone. It's what kind of movies can you see when you download. Now, it turns out DCI-P3 is heavy towards the red side, by the way. So it means in terms of if you make images in data visualization, they're going to be a little more reddish than you may have planned for them to be. Now, so what's happened is this has become the standard. And what happens is people at Pixar, the ones making those big movies they get nominated for Academy Awards for like Best Animated Film, they're converting their RenderMan code, they're converting it to a DCI-P3 display capability. So now, iPhone 14, you're thinking about a new phone maybe. So it turns out, in terms of these display modes, that Apple has gotten so good in their devices, OLED displays on smartphones, they've gotten so good that their OLED specifications are right on top of whatever the DCI-P3 standard is and the sRGB standard is. Now, here's another thing you learned from Theresa-Marie today. Who makes OLED display? Did Apple tell you they make their chips? They don't hesitate to tell you they make their chips. But just so you know, Samsung makes Apple's OLED displays. Samsung has a separate division from the phone department that makes the phones. Samsung has an OLED display department, and they take the specifications from various phone manufacturers and make the OLED display that the phone manufacturer wants, like Apple. So that's why it turns like an Apple phone might look different or display slightly different than a Samsung phone, even though the company that made the display was Samsung. Anyway, just a little trivia for you to know that Apple does not make its OLED displays. Samsung, one of its chief competitors in the phone industry, does. Okay, now let's go back to hue chromoluminance. Now, I gave you all this history about Munsell. Now look, hue chromoluminance is the most advanced color perceptual model out there. Look at that. Munsell was right. Look how interesting that geometric shape is when you put hue chromoluminance together. This is taking the CIE lab, or the CIE lab specifications I talked about earlier, and what they call putting in cylindrical coordinates. Remember, we're engineers, so cylindrical coordinates, they got them in. And this is the shape. And you will see it is not a geometrically friendly shape. That's what it looks like. So Munsell keeps being right after all these years. So that is the current hue chromoluminance, HCl, considered the most perceptually accurate color model you can use today. Now, what is the visual difference? This is red, green, and blue color wheel. And look down at that color spectrum you see. Now you'll see remember I talked about color artifacts? You see how it's unequal here down in these color bars. Now HCl color wheel, a lot of people in visualization, you see there are no artifacts across here. And here's the color combination. Now, it turns out some people don't like that that's the particular options for their color to choose for their data visualization, but that's their HCl perceptually accurate color space. All right, now, after all of this, it doesn't necessarily pass color deficiency. Look at that. Turns out that if you have protanopia, deuteranopia, or tritanopia, you might not see certain colors that they're combined together. So you got to check for color deficiency, even with a perceptually uniform color space. Now, I wrote an article in Nightingale again about the various tools that actually you can use for a perceptually uniform color scheme. Color picker, I1 hue, HCl Wizard. HCl Wizard is probably one of the more powerful ones. Now, it's closer to like Color Brewer and HCl Wizard. The difference between those, they're what I call suggestion systems. In other words, they give you a color scheme and they suggest. Color picker for data allows you to look across a range. Now, the difference between I1 hue also allows you to roll your particular color combinations. I use the tool Adobe Color, which is what I call the grandmother of color apps, a lot, because if I want to roll my own color scheme, in other words, I don't want to take Cynthia Brewer suggestions, I don't want to take HCl Wizard suggestions, I want to roll my own color scheme, I can do that with Adobe Color. That's the difference between the tools. Some of you just might want to just take the suggestions and get on with it. But anyway, here are the tools I tell you how to use approaches in my Nightingale writings. And I wrote a lot about it in 2021. So now let's get to this hex triplet stuff. Hex triplets. So we have this World Wide Web consortium, and they have a hexadecimal number system that's used, where a byte is a number ranged from 00 to FF, or 0 to 255. It used to be colors were called by 0 to 255. But now bytes represent red, green, and blue. Byte 1 is red, byte 2 is green, byte 3 is blue. So in today's world, a lot of people specify their colors, not by the RGB value, but by the hex triplet value. And they'll call a color out according to that. So now, I did not put this in this presentation, but I just want to let you know, I'm going to do Pantone matching, but I want to stop for a second and let you know something. If you happen to know a little bit more about, I'm getting myself in big trouble. If you happen to know a little bit more about color in the web specifications, you will know that they use a tool called AQ, saturation and lightness. That's another color model. Hue, saturation, and lightness is a way of representing color. The web consortium will allow you to specify a color in HSL space rather than by the red, green, and blue components. The reason that can be very important, if you want a very distinctive, unique color, and then you can make it in HSL space, you can put that in your web pages. I didn't cover that here. I didn't cover HSL and hue saturation value, which are two color spaces from the computer graphics world. Now I'm going to go on to Pantone color matching, because I do want to make sure you don't leave my lecture without knowing something about Pantone. So how many people here, yeah, I can't see you raise it, but how many people have a favorite basketball team or whatever? And how many people have a favorite basketball star? Or maybe you have a football team or a football star. I don't know. You could even have a golf team. Professional sport. Professional sport. Let me tell you something. If you go to a professional football player or a professional basketball player, they know the Pantone color of the uniform of the team that they work for. I promise you, they can Pantone color match. And when they go in, the Pantone colors are specified, just as in the Constitution of the Ukraine, the colors are specified by Pantone. Now, how did Pantone develop such power in such a system? So I like to use the yellow submarine example. We go back in time to the Beatles. Now, some people may or may not know, but the Beatles actually had a cartoon series, an animated cartoon sequence that was produced in Hollywood, California. The Beatles would come up with the design color specifications, and they would come up with the songs and everything. Now, the British would say that they wanted a certain yellow to that submarine, and they would say, I want sunshine yellow. Guess what? It was a little hard for a person in Los Angeles to say, well, what's sunshine yellow? So companies like Pantone, what they did is they took these little pieces of cardboard and they painted their colors, the colors, the pigment colors that they had on these pieces of cardboard. And then they combined them together and they made a little fan. See this little fan? And then they sent the fan out to all these people like printers and various people responsible for making color. And they said, this is your color specification. So then when the Beatles called up and said they wanted sunshine yellow, they called out the Pantone color sunshine yellow. That is a PMS color. I don't remember what yellow is, but I'll tell you, PMS 3527 is a magenta. That's magenta right over here. They called out the color system. Real scientific, right? Based on these little color swatches that were on the fan. And now today, you could get an app, if you want to pay a little bit of money, that tells you your particular colors that you want online. Pantone began providing translations of their proprietary color system to RGB, CMYK, and hex values once the online world got really popular. But just remember, those basically, when Pantone was founded in the 1950s, it was cardboard swatches that made their Pantone color system. So now let's step beyond to the digital into the physical. You have decided, you're like me, you've written a book, you've got a little book, you want to get the thing printed. But you're into it so much, or you're into the poster that advertises your book so much, that you don't want this faded CMYK printer space that you get. You want to have vivid colors. So if you go to Adobe Color, you can go in there and match your color system, and they'll give you some Pantone colors to use, and you add those Pantone inks to your printing process. Increase your budget a lot, because it's going to cost you some money, but you get a very vivid color combination. Here's one I got here, and I show you how to use Adobe Color in my writing about this. It's kind of an interesting way, but that's really where the bread and butter of the Pantone market is in terms of, in printing, is in terms of adding colors to their basically the dyes that actually produce color printouts, magazines, stuff like that. Okay, Now let's get into some pure happiness that I've had for quite a while. That is colorizing or writing about colorizing for data visualization. So this is my latest writing. It came out under US Collective. It came out November 1, and I think that's relatively recent. So I'm gonna describe it a little bit later if we get to the end of this stuff, but you can look up my latest writing. Now, it is behind a money wall. So Medium does charge a little bit. I think you get 3 free reads, and then after that, they want you to pay some money, but you might get to it in time. Whereas my Nightingale writing, if you go to Nightingale, that's not behind a money wall. You can get all of those for free. So anyway, this is where I define my 5-step color process. And remember, I started out my lecture, establish your data classes. Now you know what your data class is. Your color rule, you build your color screen. Now I've told you enough about color deficiencies and you've applied your data visualization. So now we're gonna go through an example. I'm gonna build a color scheme for the scientific visualization. I did it years ago about the perfect storm, where I'm working with a bunch of meteorologists. They're gonna take some Katrina data, and they're gonna add it to their computational model, and they're gonna try to explore what happens in these perfect storms. My charge is to come up with a color scheme that works for their needs. So here they've told me what their particular data looks like in black and white. So I've got 3D isosurface created with rainwater. I've got some infrared radiation data, and I've got to have wind velocity over top of my visualization. So I decide that I'm gonna, for A and B, I'm gonna create the 3D isosurface by making it purple. And I'm gonna force the data. In other words, this is not a painting. My data is gonna be magenta and cyan, and the data is gonna make it purple. Then here's the color theory concept. Here's the magenta and the cyan, and that's gonna make my purple. That's gonna make that purple isosurface. So my data's gotta build it. I'm not painting it on a screen. So I also need to have, I also need to have some vectors sitting over top of that thing that are gonna show no matter as the eye of the hurricane builds. So I decide to use color brewers, purple and orange. That's the color scheme. Now remember, color brewer is designed for maps. It's not necessarily designed for an animated movie. So I'm hoping it's gonna work. And I check, but for my color deficiency is step number 4. I check, because I've discussed this many, many times. I check for the color deficiency, there it is. All right, it passes color deficiency. Now back in those days, I didn't have, because I did this a number of years ago, I didn't have these color deficiency tools called the color blindness simulator. But I run it and it looks like it works. Now, I'm guessing that maybe I can run a frame today, and I'm discovering that I was very lucky, very, very lucky, because my people with color deficiencies are not gonna see my original color scheme, but they're gonna see enough to be able to differentiate the wind vectors in the eye of a hurricane. Now, I'm guessing that you might like to see a little bit of what the animation looks like. So I'm gonna stop share here. I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna do a little choreography here and hope I'm competent enough. This is a test of my capabilities. I'm hoping I'm gonna be able to share and run the video for you. Here's a video. Going.
We're seeing it.
Terrific, I'm so happy you're seeing it. So here we see, it builds up. Remember, the data is blue and magenta, and you can imagine how thrilled I was that purple showed up. And I have put these backgrounds in here to emphasize the data. So look, let's watch it again. So the data is painting this beautiful eye of the hurricane using color theory concepts. And notice the idea of having orange vector state allows the wind vectors to stay intact and on top throughout the entire visualization. It looks so simple now, but I promise you, it took hours, weeks, lots of work to get it to look that good. But anyway, I had a fun time doing it. And I had some great software engineers and programmers making my work look really fantastic during this process. If you go out on YouTube and you find this video, you will find some great audio and narration of the entire process. I'm going to show it to you one more time so you can see how color theory worked out in terms of data visualization. You can imagine, at this time, by the way, I had to be very careful. This is a high-end computational model. So sometimes I can only have one frame at a time. Oh, by the way, here are the people who helped, or the scientists involved. And there are a lot of people involved with this. At the time, I was considered a director. I wasn't a color maven as much as I knew a little bit about color, but I hadn't written my book yet. All right, so now I'm going to stop sharing. But anyway, then we're going to go back to the slideshow. But you can imagine how excited I was when that all worked out. So let's look at it one more time. Let's look at the color scheme and how exciting it was. All right, so now I want to take you on another little journey. Imagine you've got some kind of vintage, some kind of thing that's out of copyright, so you're not worried about taking somebody's copyright. And you decide that you want to use that color scheme for your visualization. You want to be different than everybody else. You want to have a different color scheme. So I wrote this little article for Nightingale that showed you how you can do that. So you can go into Adobe Color, ask it to extract some colors from this image, and then you get some colors, and notice the little hex code that got down there. Again, I tell you how Adobe insists on giving you 5 colors, even though you know you've only got 3. So I end up putting black and white as my end colors and get my 3 colors. And then what you can do is you got your own, I call it Vintage Fizz PGY. I don't know what's a good name. And if I go into Adobe, I go to Color Brewer, sure enough, nobody's got that color combination. They got something close, but I got a unique categorical or qualitative color. And I put it, and so here I show you how you can get it. I apply it to a little donut chart. I think it's really cool. Now, as my example, I'm using walnuts, cashews, and peanuts in my pantry. Now, I did a color deficiency test. And I looked down, and I want you to look at that deuteranopy example I put on. I think that that's a better color scheme for what I'm trying to do. So I go, you know what? I'm going to use that as my color scheme. I call it the nutty color scheme. You might have this happen to you, that some of the checks you do actually might give some better color schemes. And so I do it, there's the color scheme. And then I do a check again to make sure it's going to pass my color deficiency using the color blindness simulator. All right, so now I wrote a book to communicate my mystery. I hope it shows up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, that's my book. I wrote it in 2016. The copyright says 2017 on it. I go through how to use these particular tools. And then I write for Nightingale and US Collective. And so here I thank everybody who's been so important to me. But I want to, because I got a little time, I want to go over this particular example from my latest writing, because I think it might be important to you. Back in my first days of visualization, I was at the Environmental Protection Agency. And a woman scientist came in to me with this gorgeous plot. And she had every kind of color on that plot. And she had a gray screen. She was showing it to me, and it was a gray screen. I think back in those days, there was a tool called Freelance. Some of you may go back that far enough to remember it. I'm going back in the 90s. But anyway, she had this gorgeous plot on a gray screen. And she said, I lose my data, part of my data, every time I print this. And I said, really? She said, yeah, let me show you. So she's got the gray background, and she's got the color scheme and all the little plots, but she prints it out on a white piece of paper. And this is where I became the most brilliant color maven. I looked at her and I said, my dear, one of your lines is white. When you print a white line on a white piece of paper, it disappears. Now you all might be laughing at me, But this was big, you know, this is revolutionary. These were esteemed scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency. Just so you know, a white line that appears on your computer screen on a black background will disappear when you print on a white piece of paper. Just thought I'd tell you. The same thing is true if you have a black line on a white piece of paper, and then you go and you put it in a display environment that has a black background. The black background will disappear. I have written an article on it. Actually, I show you, you have a diverging color scheme with a white midpoint right here. Diverging color scheme with a black point right here. I also talk about in this article how in some situations you might look like the scheme with a black point, or you might like the scheme with the white point. But anyway, I thought I would just give you that. That's my latest article if you want to find it. Okay, I'm done and I had a great time. I had an absolutely perfect time, and I'm available for questions if anybody's got them.
So anybody that has questions, please go to the mic so that you can hear. So.
Hi, great presentation again. So don't do data visualization, love it. But my problem is, what is the color of the highway green signs? Everyone has a different color. I want to know, do you know it? Can you tell me what it is? What color space should I use? What's the RGB, HCL, MTP, YZ? I want to, in my visualizations, I want my signs to look like they do out on the real road. I want the right green, I want the right yellow, I want the right blue. Can you help me with that?
All right, you guys are gonna have to tell me, that is not specified in your specifications of signs? I mean, I'm asking a question. I mean, you know, I'm out of my league. I don't know. Like I said, for the Ukrainian flag, it actually really is specified. I would guess somehow somebody has specified that. If they haven't, the way you can get it is you can take it into, you can take a picture, or you can take an image, the most accurate image you can of that sign, push it into a tool like Adobe Color. So that's color.adobe.com. It's free. It's available. You can, anybody who's got their laptop there, you can type color.adobe.com.
And certainly one of the challenges is it's fluorescent. I mean, it's reflective.
Right.
It's designed to look to be very bright at night. And so that reflectivity changes the color space.
Yeah, I mean, they have, they have like the sign guide and the MUTCD, but I can do a color picker, but it just, if I had some, it doesn't, at least I haven't seen, maybe someone can tell me, like, it doesn't give me like an HCL number there. I don't know. That's what that just popped into my mind, so I thought it was interesting.
What you want is you want a hex code. That's going to give you, it's not going to give you the fluorescence, but it will give you the hex code. That's what you're searching for.
Hex code, okay.
You want that. But as Frank has pointed out, it's not going to give the reflectivity, the reflection, what it's going to be like at night. I mean, I would have guessed that those signs are like painted, right? They're paints.
Yeah, it's reflective.
But I would think that that's specified somewhere.
Oh, I haven't found it, so someone knows.
Pardon me?
I haven't found it, so someone knows, but I'm looking for a hex code, okay.
You're looking for a hex code, or you're looking for a specification that says how they make that sign and what kind of paint they're using. Like, I'll give you this is house paint. Sherwin-Williams has their color specified. All of these manufacturers have their, just like Pantone, they have them all specified. And then you could go back and check it. If this were a Pantone, I can tell you, Pantone has a set of fluorescent that are specifically specified. But yeah, that's the language. You want that hex code, or you want them to say how is the color specified when you manufacture a sign? How is the color specified when you manufacture? Because those signs are sent off. Somebody's making those signs somewhere, and they've got, say they're spray paint. I have no idea how you make those signs. You guys know better than me. But they have a template, and they have specifications. So it's just a matter of talking the right language. I hope that helped you there.
Yes, thank you.
Other people, while somebody else is coming up, have you got a go-to color scheme that you like? You say red and blue, there's good reasons not to use it. If we just want a safe one, what is your go-to complementary?
Oh man, I wouldn't say have a go-to, but I like to, you can see I like the purple and orange combination for the hurricane situation. I like, in terms of, all right, you say complement a diverging color scheme. I mean, you can't go wrong in terms of color deficiency and those types of things. If you do use red and orange, you're very, very likely. If you use red and green, you're probably going to get color deficiency. The one time you do it, we said somebody has a color deficiency. Tableau, the tool uses blue and orange quite a bit. It's default. You'll see that my most recent writing has a blue and a crystal blue and a coral pink combination. That's a good one to use. I use a lot of different color combinations, but I mean, I don't think you could go wrong with a, oh, that's rough, man, a cyan and an orange.
Okay,
as a
very
default,
good.
But
Great presentation. Quick question for you. We have an app that we're designing, and we found it's really hard to see colors when the sun's really bright on your phone. And so we had to pick different color schemes, and it took us a lot of tries and like resending field agents out to like look at the app, see, is there like a website or something that has a good color scheme that we can just like utilize? Or nobody's really figured that out yet. So if it's like really sunny out, you can actually still see the colors and like read inside the app. Do you get what I'm asking?
all right, so you're saying to me that you're just trying to design something for when you have your phone outside? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, they're doing inspections, and so we had to go in and we had to just have them go back out until the color schema worked so they could see it easily enough when it was really bright out. And so we had them have to do like 3 or 4 different trips, and then we'd like rechange the colors on the app, have them keep going back in and back out because everything's matching. But is there any website or any reference, or do we literally just have to keep doing trial and error? Like if we're gonna change our color schemes. Does that make sense?
Well, actually, there is a lot of discussion, right? What you're talking about is dark mode, which is when you're inside your house and things look pretty good, and light mode, which is when you're outside and things don't look so great. That hadn't been resolved yet. I'll give you that one. There's actually, I got asked that question when I was at IEEE VIZ in Oklahoma City, which was about 2 weeks ago. It's not an easy situation to have. I don't know a lot of people have resolved that yet, I'll be honest with you.
Okay, so basically.
I hate to leave you in a lurch like that, but the language that you want to use, and you want to talk with display manufacturers and those types of people, is what color schemes do you use that transition well between dark mode and light mode?
Okay.
That's the lingo you want to talk. Now, in my most recent writing, I did use a combination of transitions pretty well between dark and light mode. I don't know if that's going to solve your particular problem, because I didn't go outside and test it on my phone to see whether it would work, but I did use a combination, so you know.
No, that's great.
But it happens to be one of the unresolved problems now that people are using, especially with Apple talking about its ability about how its screen doesn't change, or the stays lit all the time and stuff like that. Anyway, that's a fancy word for dark mode and light mode.
No, it's good. I can Google
You're on the
that.
cutting edge.
Thank you.
I hope you don't get cut off, but I hate to tell you that you're on the cutting edge.
Yes, good morning. Great lecture, thank you. I actually texted my neighbor who's been in printing for 40 years, and I said he probably really would have been enjoyed sitting with you and listening to this. But I have a question. I work for Federal Highway Administration, and everything that we produce and put online has to go through 508 compliance to ensure its accessibility. And I was wondering, as we were listening to you and seeing these great, sort of displays and colors, how does 508 compliant impact? And you've worked, with EPA. So how has that impacted your work and our work going forward?
I can't really speak to 508 in terms of, like wheelchair and blind and that type of accessibility. I went over and over and over in this lecture, color deficiency. And that's the compliance that I would look at in terms of color. So I've gone over protanopy, deuteranopy, and tritanopy. By the way, tritanopy is increasing the blue cone damage because they're starting to show some people that successfully go through cancer treatments. Sometimes some of that radiation and other types of things that they have to go through can damage the blue cone, just so you know. It used to be a very, very small percentage, but the percentage has gone slightly up. But in terms of, I can't speak to other types of compliance, because I don't know what to say if somebody can't see color. I mean, basically my lecture, you can do those alt things. I do that all the time when I write an article, I put text in there. But I don't, I have a very, very good friend that I've known since college that actually is blind, and she actually can detect certain types of lights that shine on her eyes. I think she can see a certain amount of color, but I don't want to say that, I'm not a medical trained person to answer stuff like that. So I'm sorry, I can't give you more compliance, it's just tell you to please check for color deficiency. I will give you an anecdotal answer. I'm sorry to hold somebody up who has another question, and that is, I learned color deficiency situations the hard way in my time in EPA. In the 1990s, I was doing a visualization at Lake Erie, and I had a plot that was on a green background, and I had a pink line going across it. And my researcher in Lake Erie, who was working with his son, the guy told me he couldn't see the line. And his son said, my father's red-green colorblind. He can't see that combination. So that taught me the hard way. So I put a blue line across it. So I did my cyan green example I showed you earlier. And then he saw the line fine. He didn't see what I saw, but he probably saw that purple-yellow combination, but he saw a difference, But I learned that out in the field. The most dramatic thing is when you're working with somebody and they tell you they can't see it, then you realize, you may be colorblind. Okay,
Well,
I hope
thank
I
you.
helped a little.
Thank you.
Thank you, Theresa-Marie. I will say that I was a physics and music major in college, got a job as an artist and photographer. So I had to kind of teach myself this, and I would have loved to have had this presentation because I've been through all of those books and studied this, and yes, this presentation is a picture that just is pouring out over the top and all of the different color theories. The good part is this will be recorded. It will be online, so you can go back and see this presentation so that you can absorb this information even more the second time around. So thank you very much, and we will just